Now for the moment you've all been waiting for, this week's presentation. Kat Miller, Inside Out Aging. The truth is, if we are fortunate, we will have the opportunity to grow old, experiencing along the way the inevitable losses and increasing limitations, as well as progressive refinement of what is essential. With aging, we can see our life as from a great altitude, as a sort of landscape, with all its diverse parts connected. From here we can harvest wisdom, acknowledge resilience, and discover peace, compassion, and gratitude at the heart of our lives. Join Kat for some ageist repudiation, and to learn more about how we can cherish the beauty of life, not despite its perishability, but precisely because of it. Now, Kat has an MA in spiritual psychology and is a counselor here in Ajijic and abroad. She currently plays with photography and writing as ways to express her perception of today's topic. Please give a very warm and socially distant welcome to Kat Miller.
Everyone. See if I'm on. Can you hear me yet? Almost? There we go. I think so. Well, I'm really grateful to Open Circle, to Lake Chapala Society for continuing the tradition of Open Circle that allows people like me to come here and speak to all of you and share my passion and what I'm interested in and my curiosities. So I'm very grateful. Thank you, sir. So what brings me to this talk is curiosity and passion. I'm just going to keep adjusting this till we don't hear the clap. Okay. I've been a therapist for many, many years, and I've been a person that has been curious about people for much longer than I've been a therapist. Even since I was a little kid, I've always wondered about people and how they're doing and who they are. And a number of years ago, I moved here and I started being with people that were older than me. I actually came when I was a bit younger, and those became my clients and people became my friends. And I started to learn about what it is to age, both the challenges of aging and the beauty of aging and the fear of aging and the fear of death and the fear of the ways to die. So a lot of fear. And also people doing things for the first time. It's a little staticky. Are you hearing staticky? Yes, okay.
Down a little bit, it won't pop.
Down, is that down? Okay. So I got very curious. I had been working with people that were of midlife. Still popping. I seem to be able to get it down. Okay, maybe I've got it. I think I got it. Okay. So I had been working with midlife people for years because I was at midlife. I'd always kind of worked with people that were of my age group or much younger when I worked with children and gangs and different ages. So I was working with midlife people, and I started to transition into those of us over 60. And I found that there was great kind of a double-edged sword of being free in some ways for the first time in life for some people, and also being hampered by fears of what could come, and also from the challenges of what it is maybe to take care of a loved one, to take care of one's own body. And so I started looking at aging, I started talking with my friends, and what I was hearing is that people don't want to age. They think it's bad, that beauty goes, that sensuality goes, that interest goes, that it's too late to do anything. And that seemed crazy, impossible. How could that be? So that's where I got this talk from. So about 3 years ago, I started working with Candace Luciano, who maybe some of you know. She passed away this January 1st of this year. And we started to study and watch what was out there, look at YouTubes, look at TED Talks, read books, to see what was being talked about with aging. And so this is some of what her and I came up with. So the first thing I think that's really important to note is this U-curve of happiness study. If you've watched some TED Talks, you may have heard about it. And the U-curve of happiness says, contradictory to what people believe, the U-curve of happiness says that people are the happiest when they're the youngest and when they're the oldest. And between the ages of sort of 30 and 50, they're the most unhappy, and then they start to come up. So by the time they are 55, 60, 70, so 70-year-olds are happier than 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds are happier than 70-year-olds, and 90-year-olds are happier than 80-year-olds, and etc. So that's a very interesting, it's kind of a cool study to read. It was done in 145 countries, including 109 developing countries, so it's not an American, Canadian, Mexican specific. It's all over the place. It was done over many years. It's been replicated many times. And that in itself helps to debunk ageism. It kind of stares it in the face because people think that older people are unhappy. And there's so many of the younger generation that are actually terrified to get old. I'm on some websites, part of newsletters, on different things where people can blog in, they can chime in, make comments. And a lot of young people are attending these kinds of events saying, I'm 24 and I'm terrified to age. That's, that's relatively scary. So we have to help those people. We have to help the young people age. We've gained 30 years since 1900 in longevity. So aging is a relatively new possibility. Most people died when they were younger than most of us are right now. Now, my mother died at 97, so of course that doesn't count so much, though she had dementia for the last number of years, so in a way it does count. So this 30 years, we don't know much about. There hasn't been a lot of studies done, and I'm going to talk about some of the developmental stages as I see them, as I'm interpreting them, because they sort of stop. If you look up the developmental stages, there's an arrow. Many of us here are in the arrow portion. I love it, seeing it. There's this arrow. I'm like, oh, okay. They've got everything, from thumb sucking all the way up and crawling and, intimacy and relationship and how to, working and success and failure and identity. And then there's an arrow. So we are of the arrow generation. The other thing that I want to say before I get into the developmental stages is that there's another study. It was done at Yale University. It was done over a 23-year period of time. They took a group of people, I don't recall the numbers right now, and they asked them a bunch of questions about whether they were looking forward, had a positive attitude towards aging, or they had a negative attitude towards aging. And then they followed those people for 23 years. And what they found is that the people that had a positive attitude towards aging lived 7.5 years longer than the people that had a negative attitude towards aging. They eliminated all the pieces about income, health. They took out kind of all these different variables, and they just stayed with the one. Positive attitude towards aging, negative attitude towards aging. So that's huge. It shows the power of ageism, which is I'll talk about a little bit later. The power of the pharmaceutical industry and the power of the beauty industry to actually instill this, like, it's a bad thing. It's not a good thing. The other part of that is maybe some of us came from families or lived around neighbors or our aunts or our uncles had crappy aging. So there's that possibility too. Some of us had parents or aunts or uncles or neighbors that did beautifully, and some of us had crappy. So there's an influence there, and we'll talk a little bit about what goes into having crappy aging. I think that's the technical term. The scientific term is crappy. What I want to talk about this next study is really important, and it lends into when I talk about the developmental stages of this time, where the arrow is. So Lars Tornstrom has done numerous studies. It's a wide-ranging study that most people believe as we age that our cognitive abilities decline. And that's a very common belief. It's also why one of the fears is, oh my God, cognitive decline. And of course there is cognitive decline. There's dementia and Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. There's a variety of things that can contribute to cognitive decline. But age is not one of them. So what's true in these studies is that we actually get expanded cognitive abilities. So I'm going to read this part. Developmentally, our cognitive functioning is not really declining as prior research would have us believe, but qualitatively changing to become more integrated, complex, and adaptive. So what is happening is that we may be slower we may not jump fast, we may not come to a conclusion really fast, we may not add up numbers as fast as we did, we may not remember, was it Thursday of this week or last week, as fast as we used to. But what's happening is that we actually have more expanded perspectives with which to see a problem. So a lot of companies, corporations are now starting to hire back the elders that they let go, bringing them back into key positions, because they see that the young people have the, kind of speed and wherewithal and, that kind of jazz. But what they don't know is how to see the bigger picture. They don't know how to look at the lay of the land, the map, so to speak, of what an issue or a company or whatever's going on. So they're bringing back in the elders because the elders can see from multi-perspective. So if you think about it just for a minute as I'm talking here, can you see how in your own life, how you might have solved problems when you were in your 20s and 30s, whether it was a relationship issue, a work issue, family issue, or whatever. There was a kind of a way of grasping right away, sort of like, oh, I need to do that. Oh, no, that won't work. Oh, how do I fix that? Okay, what do I got to do? There's sort of this. And now when you look at a problem, let's say you're looking at something with your grandchildren or your own health or whatever, you sort of go, well, what's the context? How does this fit into what I want in my life overall? How does this fit into what I'm doing? How does this fit into the relationship I actually have with my children? So there's this ability to multi-perspective look. That ability naturally looks slower, right? Because even though it's relatively quick, it is a little slower because there's you're looking at 10 things versus you're looking at 2 things, and the fear running through your body that wants a decision immediately. A lot of us don't run the kind of fear and nervousness and anxiety that we did when we were younger. And we also know we've made it through such bummer stuff in our life, stuff that we thought we could never make it through, that when something does arise, we actually know we made it. I mean, I certainly have made it. I thought, I'm not going to make it. In fact, I didn't want to make it with one specific experience in my life, but I did make it. And that builds in the knowledge of resilience. So we'll talk a little bit about that, or maybe I'll just say now, resilience, we're all resilient. You couldn't be here if you're not. Most of us don't think of ourselves as resilient, because in questionnaires we ask people, do you see yourself as resilient? People go, oh, well, I don't know, maybe, kind of. But really, if you think of the 5 crappy things you've gone through in your life, at least 2 of them you thought you couldn't do. I'm not going to make it. I can't get through it. It's never going to be okay again. I have no way of moving forward. You are here. So you are resilient. So resilience is what we have. So it's one of the developmental stages is we have resilience. We have made it. Everybody here has. So this cognitive expansion versus cognitive decline, unless you have an illness, is really important when we look at the developmental stages, because what does that mean we can do? So what we can do with this expanded ability to take more in and to see from more perspectives is that we can actually kind of lift off from our lives and sort of look down at it from a way that we couldn't when we were in them, when we were in the situations. So we can look at our lives from like a great altitude and sort of see the lay of the land that can be looked at freshly now, given what we know now. So one of the things that I notice in people that I know, and certainly myself until it was pointed out to me, was ideas and thoughts I had about what took place in my life and what it meant, and what I experienced and what was right and what was wrong, were decided at that very time that the thing happened. So 40 years later or 50 years later, I may look back at something and say, well, it was like this and this and that, and that's what happened, and I felt this way, and I was abandoned. Looking now, if I can take that situation and look at it from this altitude perspective, I can see it freshly. I can see it anew. I can say, oh, this is how I saw it then. As I look at it now, given all that I've learned and all that I'm learning and discovering, wow, I see it a bit different. Oh, I didn't get the nuance of that. Or I didn't understand that they were also trying the best they could. Or I didn't understand, so it's very important to have in what we're going to call good aging, which means you're relatively happy and feel fulfilled in a sense of peace. It's very important to be able to reflect on your life from this sort of altitude, using your new cognitive abilities that have been developing, since about 50 up and are just getting trugging at about 65. So to be able to make peace with our past, it doesn't mean, making peace with our past doesn't mean resolving. That's a very different thing. Resolving has this sort of like work and heaviness and, I got to go through all the pieces and it's lovely if we can resolve. I don't want to make it a bad thing. But there's a way to make peace, which is this is one of the abilities that we have in the developmental stage of this arrow stage we're in, is we have the ability to accept, to say, it happened. I may have made mistakes, or I did make a mistake. I made a horrible mistake, and I can see how that played out in my life. Or I can see the effect of that on other people in my life. It happened. Here I am. I can't change that. I can see how that's informed my life, maybe in negative ways and in ways that I've lowered my self-esteem with it. But is there an opportunity to look now and see what's possible? What's possible now with that? Do I have to use that against me? Is there a way I can have some compassion for myself? Can I have compassion for others? Because we've made mistakes. We've betrayed people, we've been betrayed, we've accidentally hurt people, we've on purpose hurt people. I mean, I want to swear. There's a word here I want to use, but I won't. Has hit the fan. And you can fill in the blank. Many times in our life. So this expanded capacity as we age, part of this comes that we're slowing down. And there's a thought about slowing down that it's a bad thing. But we're actually becoming, even if we're not Buddhists, we're kind of becoming Buddhists because we are slowing down. And in that slowdown, and the slowdown is a natural thing. It's put out as a negative. Like the best way to age is to do everything you could do 40 years ago and look young doing it. That's considered well aging. But slowing down is actually a core skill of our time of life. It allows us to notice the present moment. It allows us to enjoy, as you're listening to me, you might be hearing the water and the birds and sort of the beauty of the fake backdrop. And, it allows us to be present to what is. And it's appropriate that when we were younger, we were faster. because we had a lot to do. We were raising families, working, scurrying after children, trying to get ahead, buying a house, doing all the things, failing, losing it all, building back up, changing partners, getting divorces. So we're fast. So now we don't have to be fast. And there's a great value to being fast, but there's also great value to being slower. So it's also one of the developmental pieces from here. So from this altitude position of looking at our life, maybe looking at life in general, seeing things in a new way, maybe biases that we had against people, situations, countries, biases against, vanilla ice cream, it could be anything. We can see from a new perspective if we choose to. And from there, we can harvest wisdom. We can, as I said earlier, acknowledge resilience. We can discover peace, compassion, joy, residing inside of us. So wisdom is the big thing talked about people who are older are supposed to be wise. I know people that say, I'm not wise. Like you say the word wisdom, I'm not wise. And it's like, okay, well, it's not a dirty word. It's a kind of a lovely word that points to this ability to look over all of our experiences, what we've experienced politically, socially, in our own lives, in our communities, in our neighbors, and to see it from a wider range, to really see what took place from a larger perspective, and to be able to harvest that, to be able to take that in and say, I always thought, what we did in the 60s looked like this. Now that I look at it, it looks like this. That's wisdom, being able to take in your life, look at it, have some modicum of peace. It doesn't have to be perfect peace, modicum of peace with it, and that is wisdom. So it's not it's not form. Now, there are people that are wise when they're younger. It is a quality of this aging developmental stage. People who are wise when they're younger have tended to have hardship. They've gone through something and it marked them. And in that marking, they have some wisdom. Maybe they had a huge accident, maybe they were abused, they've had something. And so those younger people hold what is more natural to us as we've aged. Because one of the key factors of having a life, an older life, an elder life that you love, that I love, is all the hardships of life. Those that haven't had hardships can tend to not appreciate life as much as others. And this is according to studies. This isn't like Kat's philosophy. This is the studies that are done. People that have gone through some hard stuff. That's why, there's many of the painters we love, or the writers we love, or the music composers, or the things that we love in the arts and we appreciate in our friends, are maybe where they've gone through some stuff and they've come out of it and they have something to say about it. And so it's one of the key factors of aging well is having a really kind of crappy life off and on, and having taken it in. So we're a crossover generation. Let's see how I'm doing about time, because I can really kind of ramble. We're the crossover generation. Some of our parents or our grandparents did not do so well. They may have, if you can recall, people maybe in your family or your neighborhood, they might say, oh, Sue, Aunt Sue, she never got over the loss of her whatever. She never again, she kind of never came out of her room after 27, and that was a time where people didn't have the resources. Not that we ever get over things, by the way. We don't need to get over anything, because we're more like a tapestry or a rug. There's a weaving here. Our lives are a weaving, so this gets woven into our lives. But the term used at that time was get over. She never got over it, or he never got over it. And that's true. They were not able to weave the sadness, the tragedies, the traumas, the losses, into their lives, and they stopped and froze. Well, now there's so many resources, and we know this because we didn't have that many resources when we were young, but you can see now your grandchildren or the young people you know. I mean, if they got a hangnail, there is a group for it. There is support, a website, a blog, Zoom meetings, which is amazing because people are able to speak. And this is what our parents' generation and their parents were not able to do. They didn't speak. They weren't able to speak about being, in the wars, World War II, World War I, World War III. Even Vietnam was very, so people didn't know that they could speak. And they weren't really allowed to. So that has affected how we may look at aging people as looking at that. Well, we're not that. We are the boomers. We are the boomers, and we make a difference wherever we go. And aging is really an important one because the young people need our wisdom. And this greater perspective that we have, this kind of high altitude perspective that we have, is it's really important to share with those that are younger in our lives what we're discovering and what we know about life and what we know about, getting hysterical over things and what we know about that you actually can live through basically anything. What we know about where peace is located. What we know about striving on the outside to get satisfaction on the inside. It's really important that we pass along what we're discovering, whatever that is. I'm suggesting, these things, but it may be completely different things. What we know about, might as well take up the ukulele now because at 65 you'll be pretty good at it. Or, the things, this community is amazing, right? People are playing ukulele, tap dancing for the first time in their lives, so we're doing something really well here. So this stage is important to pass on the wisdom to the younger generation, both about the beauty of life and the brutality of life, because life is both. Primary is this, for us at this stage, is to have a kind and caring relationship with ourselves. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if we are still holding against ourselves the stuff from before, where we made all those mistakes, and overlooked things, and betrayed people, the things I spoke about earlier, we may end up bitter, with resentment, tremendous disappointment, and a lot of mental rehashing and redoing. And that, as we know, because we do, I certainly do this over little situations, hey, getting ready for this talk, this sort of hashing and going over and trying to make it different, that takes away from being present to the moment, enjoying life as it is, being available for something coming on one's plate that you have to kind of look up to see, that new thing coming. So this is very important. So one of the other features of a happy life at this stage of life is knowing that time is short. The studies show that the people that really get it, not just to flip it off as an intellectual, well, of course time's short. I'm going to die sooner, I have less years ahead of me than I do behind me. The people that actually take it in start to make changes in their life. They start to kick out relationships that don't work. They start to stop doing crap they hate. They stop stuff and they start stuff. It's a time where people start to look at the question, what has meaning now? It's a question that just arises sort of naturally. What's important now? What refinements now? Older people tend towards simplification because they don't want all the crap. The beautiful stuff that we all want. So in support of that is that we are also caring less about what people think about us. And that is prime to this stage. And it's a natural development. Most people you know probably say, you know, I just don't care as much as I used to about what people think of me. So that's actually a developmental stage, which is really cool. So we're being helped and supported by our bodies, by our minds, to come into aging beautifully. Now, in the context of this, we're also in a whole bunch of loss, right? We realize that everybody we love and know is going to die. Either us first, in one way or another. It's either going to be us first or them first. That is here and always present for us of this age. It could have been present when we were younger, because we also know so many people when we were younger that have died. They're gone. Or relationships, or ex-husbands, or ex-wives, or lovers, or dogs, or, you know, life has always been coming and going. But now we really have that sense. There's many, many people here Lakeside who have been married for over 50 years. And somebody's going to go, most likely not at the same time. So we have losses. We have the losses of identities. If we spent our life really where our identity was something that we've done, and we claim it as who we are, this can be very challenging. For women, that a certain kind of physical beauty was how they moved in the world, they really have a hard time. It's a tremendous challenge, aging. It shouldn't have to be, but it is, because the beauty industry is just kicking butt on anti-aging, anti-aging, anti-aging. So there's a loss of making peace and letting go of identities that were here, maybe work beautifully for us, that we're proud of, that we've loved. They're no longer the current identity. That's a loss. There's a grieving process of that. You can see sometimes where people hang on to old identities, and it's not a pretty look. You know, or you know, at a cocktail party, the kind of conversations or whatever. It's really helpful to really realize that we've always been in flux. We've always moved through different roles. My God, we were toddlers. I mean, we've been growing and changing and morphing from day one. And that's going to continue to the end of our lives. And to embrace that instead of to be freaked out by it. So the losses, I mean, as a community of people, if you're from the US, particularly this is highlighted, but from other parts of the world, you know, as baby boomers, we tried to do some stuff in our 60s that we thought, in the 1960s, that we thought were going to have a lasting, beautiful impact on the planet. And we are in grief and stunned that the ideals that we held and what we thought was going to happen did not. In fact, the younger generation has been hit hard with, you know, a greater degree of awareness of racism that we kind of thought was getting better. At least that was where my denial lay, is I thought it was getting better. You know, we thought that, you know, just give peace a chance and imagine and all these, and it didn't. So there's that loss that we failed. And to be able to be with that failure, not have to deny it, not have to excuse it, not have to, and that's one of the features of being with any kind of loss. The loss of a loved one, the loss of a career, is to be with it. And just to grieve it. To grieve is to grieve something that we love, right? We don't grieve things that leave that we don't love. We're like, thank God that's gone. But to grieve is, you know, that's a great sadness for our generation. So that's a community loss, right? We share that loss in common. So the other is that there's a tremendous fear of death and dying. Many, many older people are afraid to die, and certainly afraid how they're going to die. Now, the fear of death itself is very important to make peace with. To decide where you really are with it. To really, you know, read about it, look about it, read Being Mortal, you know, watch a TED Talk, like get informed. Because what happens if you're afraid to die is that it will influence how you live. Because of course, we're all going to die. So it's going to happen fearfully or not fearfully. But if there's fear of death, then it influences how we act today, but it also influences how we might choose our dying. So the medical world has made us much more, we can live much longer. It's helped us in so many ways, pacemakers and all kinds of things for cancer and just tons of things that have helped us expand our life expectancy. But they can also, on the other side, they can put us into a long, slow, painful dying process. So it's very important if that ends up happening, and it will. This group of people, some of us are going to have like this crap for death. Seems to be my word today is crap. Sorry about that. I'm sure there's a much more elegant term. So making peace with death allows us to look and see, how do I want to die? What am I willing to do to stay alive? What is the quality of life that is important to me as I die? If you haven't answered those questions, I used to do hospice work. What I saw directly, and of course in my studies as I was learning to do hospice work, is the people that haven't made peace, want to live at any cost, they hang on and they can sometimes have really brutal deaths. And maybe that's fine. I mean, you know, for me that's not fine. I definitely have a bias. I don't mean to impart that bias. What I really mean to do is to make sure that we all have a chance to look at what is important to us and how do I want to be with it. Because at our age, time is short. Again, we have the value of that knowledge. Time is short. How do I want to live? How do I want to die? How am I willing to, what's a quality of life for me as I come near the end of my life? So the two kind of blocks or challenges to these developmental stage kind of unfolding, you know, with this compassion, inner peace, this sense of joy, this slowing down and appreciating the moments, feeling gratitude, having a sense of awe. What can block that are two things that I'm going to talk about really quickly. I've basically talked about them, but I really want to frame them in this context. One is ageism, where we've been told, you know, it's not a good thing, it's not a pretty thing, it's not an okay thing, you don't have the value you used to have, that by being invisible, you know, you're invisible now to us. Actually, there's some famous writer, she says, I love invisibility, I can do whatever the hell I want, nobody pays attention. But so ageism is a really important thing to look at because the largest group of ageists are us, is our age group. So the other isms, most people, if you're black, you don't think you're whatever the black stereotypes are. If you're a feminist, you don't think that women are whatever those stereotypes are. If you're cross-sexual, cisgender, you don't think that you're whatever those stereotypes are. But with ageism, it's different. We're actually the ones that embrace the stereotypes. We're the ones sharing them with each other. Oh my God, I've got another wrinkle. Oh my God, my hip. Oh my God, we are the ageists promoting ageism. So for me, that's been an exciting area of study. And then the second obstacle is the one I've really already talked about, which is making peace with the past. Modicum of peace. Not perfection, and that includes yourself, your relationship with yourself. Why not befriend ourselves? We weren't taught to do that. We're kind of the age where you weren't supposed to acknowledge your, you know, if somebody says you're great at that, or, you know, you kind of go, oh, no, I'm not. Oh, not very much. No, I'm not pretty. Oh, look at me. We're of that generation. We're taught not to show off, not to, you know, so that also kind of created this sense that I'm not supposed to, like, love myself. When I used to teach workshops and bring that up, you know, okay, so here, who loves themselves too? Oh, God. Oh, I mean, you know, love myself. I mean, I kind of like myself, but love myself, oh, that's just carried away. I mean, really, like intelligent, fantastic women that I worked with in groups. It was like, okay, could everybody write down 5 things they like about themselves? You would have thought I was asking for, I don't know what, Einstein's relativity theory. So, liking ourselves is important. And I'm right here. So, this is a thought and something maybe to share with people. Is it your experience that you are less interesting, curious, open, bright, funny, kind, caring, affectionate, loving than you were 30 years ago? And I see some, I hope to see this, but you can do this. So just that in itself, I'm going to read it one more time. Is it your experience that you are less interesting, curious, open, bright, competent, funny, kind, caring, affectionate, loving than you were 30 years ago? Right? So that is the bull of aging. That's what ageism, that's how you debunk ageism. You tell the truth about your experience. Okay? And I want to leave you with this from David White. And above all, how will you shape a life equal to and as beautiful and as astonishing as a world that can birth you, bring you into the light, and then just as you are beginning to understand it, take you away? David White. Thank you, everybody.